Egil's Saga Skallagrimssonar. Egil's Saga.
Chapter 58 of King Eric and Egil. King Eric heard the concluding words of Egil that he spake last at the thing, and his wrath waxed hot. But all men had gone weaponless to the thing, therefore the king attempted no attack. He bade his men hasten to their ships, and they did as he bade. Then when they came to the strand, the king summoned his household thing and told them his purpose. "We must now," said he, "untent our ships and row after Arinbjorn and Egil, and this I will have you know, that we will take Egil's life if we get the chance, and spare no man who shall stand up for him." After that they went aboard, made all ready as speedily as might be, and pushed out the ships and rowed to the place where Arinbjorn's ships had been. These were now all gone. Then the king bade that they should row after them northwards by the sound, and when he came to Sown Sea, then there was Arinbjorn's company rowing in towards Sheeping. And thither the king turned in after them, and he came up with Arinbjorn's ship in the inner part of the Sheeping Sound. At once the king made for it, and they exchanged words. The king asked whether Egil was in the ship. Arinbjorn answered, "Egil is not here," he said. "O king, thou mayst at once see, here on board are none but those whom thou knowest, and Egil will not be found down under the benches, though thou should seek him there." The king asked Arinbjorn what he knew latest of Egil. He said that Egil was on a cutter with 30 men, and they took the way out to Stone Sound. Then the king told his men to row by the inner sound and shape their course so as to meet Egil. There was a man named Kettle. He was of King Eric's guard, an uplander by family. He was pilot on the king's ship and steered the same. Kettle was a tall man and a handsome one. He was near of kin to the king. It was generally said that he and the king were like in appearance. Now Egil, before going to the thing, had had his ship launched and the cargo put on board, and after parting with Arinbjorn, he and his went their own way to Stone Sound, till they came to his ship, which lay there afloat in the haven with tent overspread. Then they went up aboard the ship, but the cutter rowed beside the rudder of the ship, between the land and the ship, and the oars there lay in the loops. Next morning, when day had hardly dawned, the watch were aware that some ships were rowing for them. But when Egil saw that it was an enemy, he stood up and bade that they should leap into the cutter. He armed himself at once, as did they all. Egil took up those chests of silver which King Athelstan gave him, and bore them with him. They leapt armed into the cutter and rowed forward between the land and the long ship that was advancing nearest to the land. This was King Eric's ship. But as it happened suddenly, and there was little light, the two ships ran past each other. And when the stern castles were opposite, then Egil hurled a spear and smote in the middle the man who sat at steering. Kettle to wit, at once he got his bane. Then King Eric called out and bade men row after Egil and his party. But as their vessels ran past Egil's merchant ship, the king's men leapt aboard of it, and those of Egil's men who had been left behind and not leapt into the cutter were all slain, who could be caught, but some escaped to land. 10 men of Egil's followers were killed there. Some ships rowed after Egil, but some plundered the merchant ship. All the booty on board was taken, and the ship burnt. But those who rowed after Egil pulled hard, 2 at each oar, and they could even so take the rowing by turns, for they had no lack of men on board, while Egil's crew was short, they being now but 18 on the cutter. The distance between them lessened, but inside of the island was a shallow sound between it and the other islands. It was now low water. Egil and his rowers ran their cutter into the shallow sound, but the long ships could not float there. Thus pursuers and pursued were parted. The king then turned back southwards, but Egil went north to seek Arinbjorn. Then sang Egil a stave. Wakener of weapon din, the warlike prince hath wrought, where I escaped scot-free. Scathe on our gallant 10, yet sped my hand a spear, like springing salmon swift, that rushed and Kettle's rib rent sore with deathful wound. Egil came to Arinbjorn and told him these tidings. Arinbjorn said that he could expect nothing better in dealing with King Eric. But you shall not want for money, Egil. I will make good the loss of your ship and give you another, in which you can well sail to Iceland. Asgerda, Egil's wife, had remained at Arinbjorn's while they went on to the thing. Arinbjorn gave Egil a good seaworthy ship, and had it laden with such things as Egil wished. This ship Egil got ready for sea, and again he had a crew of about 30 men. Then he and Arinbjorn parted in friendship, and Egil sang, "Requite him, righteous gods, for robbery of my wealth. Hunt him away, be wroth, high Odin, heavenly powers. Foe of his folk, base king, may Frey and Njord make flee. Hate him, land guardians hate, who holy ground hath scorned." Chapter 59. King Eric slays his brothers. Harald Fairhair set his sons to rule in Norway when he began to grow old. Eric he made king above all his other sons. It was when Harald had been king for 70 years that he gave over the kingdom into the hands of his son Eric. At that time Gunnhilda bare a son, whom Harald the king sprinkled with water, giving him his own name, and he added this, that he should be king after his father if he lived long enough. King Harald then settled down in retirement, being mostly in Rogaland or Hordaland. But 3 years later King Harald died in Rogaland, and a mound was raised to his memory by Haugesound. After the death of the king there was great strife between his sons, for the men of Vik took Olaf for their king, but the throne Sigurd. But these two his brothers Eric slew at Tunsberg, 1 year after King Harald's death. All these things happened in one and the same summer. King Eric's going with his army eastwards to Vik to fight with his brothers, and before that the strife of Egil and Borgenand at the Gula thing, with the other events that have just been told. Borgenand remained at home on his estate when the king went to the war, for he thought it unsafe for him to leave home while Egil was still in the land. Hard, his brother, was now there with him. There was a man named Frodi, a kinsman of King Eric, very handsome, young in years, but a man. King Eric left him behind to protect Borgenand. Frodi was staying at Alrekstead, a royal farm, and had some men there. The son of Eric and Gunnhilda there was named Rognvald, who was then 10 or 11 years old, and had the markings of a good man. He was with Frodi when these things happened, but before King Eric rode forth to this war he made Egil an outlaw through all of Norway, and free for any man to kill. Arinbjorn was with the king in the war, but before he left home, Egil took his ship to sea and made for the outlying fishing station called Vitar, over against Aldi. It is on the high road of the seas. Fishermen were there. 'Twas a good place for hearing tidings. Then he heard that the king had made him an outlaw, whereupon Egil sang a stave. Lawbreaker, land demon, long voyage lays on me. He bane of his brothers, beguiled by his bride, Gunnhilda the guilt bears. Grim queen of my exile, fain am I full swiftly her frauds to repay. The weather was calm, a fell wind blew by night, a sea breeze by day. One evening Egil sailed out to sea, but the fishermen were then rowing into land, to wit who had been set as spies on Egil's movements. They had this to tell, that Egil had put out and sailed to sea and was gone. This news they carried to Borgenland, and when he knew these tidings, then he sent away all those men that he had before for protection. Thereafter he rode into Ulfstead and bade Frodi to his house, for he had a great ale drinking there. Frodi went with him, taking some men. They were feasted well there and made merry, with no fear of danger. Rognvald, the king's son, had a pinnace, rowed by 6 men on either side, painted all above the sea line. He had with him 10 or 12 who constantly followed him, and when Frodi had left home, then Rognvald took the pinnace, and they rowed out to Herdla, 12 in number. A large farm on the king's was there, whereof the manager was named Skegg-Thorir. Rognvald in his childhood had been fostered there. Thorir received the king's son joyfully. There too was no lack of drink. Chapter 60. The Slaying of Borgenland and Rognvald the king's son. Egil sailed out to sea for the night, as was written above, and when morning came the wind fell and there was a calm. They then lay drifting, letting the ship ride free for some nights. But when a sea breeze came on, Egil said to his shipmen, "We will now sail to land, for I do not quite know, should the sea wind come to blow hard, where we could make land. 'Tis a dangerous-looking coast in most places." The rowers bade Egil rule their course. So then they made sail, and sailed into the waters about Herdla. There they found a good haven, and spread the tent over the ships, and lay there for the night. They had on the ship a little boat, in which went Egil with 3 men. They rowed into Herdla, and set a man on the island to learn tidings. And when he came down to the ship, he said that there at the farm was Rognvald, the king's son, and his men. They sat there a-drinking. Said he, I lit on one of the house carls. He was ale-mad, fully drunk, and said there they must not drink less than was drunk at Borgenland's, though Frodi was feasting there with a party of 5. He said that no one there was more than the household save Frodi and his men. Whereupon Egil rowed back to the ship, and bade the men rise and take their weapons. They did so. The ship they put out from the shore and anchored. Egil left 12 men to guard the ship, but himself went on the ship's boat, they being 18 in all. They then rowed in along the sound. They so regulated their pace that they came to Fenring at eventide, and put into a hidden creek there. Then said Egil, Now will I go up into the island and spy out what I can get to know, but you shall await me here. Egil had his weapons that he was wont to have, a helm and shield, a sword at his girdle, and a halberd in his hand. He went up into the island and along the border of a wood. He had now drawn a hood over his helm. He came where there were some lads, and with them large sheep-dogs, and when they began to exchange words, he asked whence they were, and why they were there, and why they had such big dogs. They said, "You must be a very silly fellow. Have you not heard that a bear goes about the island here? He kills both men and sheep, and a price is set upon his head. We watch here at Asker every night over our flocks that are penned in the fold. By why go you that night so unarmed?" He answered, "I too am afraid of the bear, and a few, methinks, now go weaponless. He has long pursued me tonight. See there now, where he is the skirt of the wood, all are asleep at this farmhouse." The boy said that Borgund and Frodi would be drinking still. They sit at it every night. "Then tell them," said Egil, "where the bear is, but I will hasten home." So he went away, but the boy ran home to the farmhouse and into the room where they were drinking. All had gone to sleep save these three, Onund, Frodi, and Had. The boy told them there was the bear outside. They took the weapons which hung there by them, and at once ran out and up to the wood. From the main forest ran out a spur of wood that scattered bushes. The boy told them where the bear had been in the bushes. Then they saw that the branches moved, whence they guessed that the bear would be there. Then Borgund advised that Hard and Frodi should run forward between the shrubs and the main forest and stop the bear from gaining the wood. Bergenund ran forward to the bushes. He had helm and shield, a sword at his girdle, a halberd in his hand. Egil was there before him in the bushes, but no bear. And when he saw where Borgund was, he unsheathed his sword, and taking the coil of cord attached to the hilt, wound it around his arm, and so let the sword hang. In his hand he grasped his halberd, and then ran forward to meet Borgund. When Borgund saw, he quickened his pace and cast his shield before him, and ere they met, each hurled his halberd at the other. Egil opposed the halberd with his shield held aslant, so that the halberd with a cut tore out the shield and flew it to the ground. But Egil's weapon came full on the middle of the shield, and went right through it far up the blade, and the weapon was fast in the shield. Onund's shield was thus cumbersome. Then quickly did Egil grasp his sword hilt. Onund also began to draw his sword, but ere it was half drawn, Egil pierced him with a thrust. Onund reeled at the blow, but Egil suddenly snatched back his sword and made a cut at Onund, well nigh taking off his head. Then Egil took his halberd out of the shield. Now Hard and Frodi saw Borgund fall, and ran. Egil turned to meet them. At Frodi he threw his halberd, which piercing the shield went into his breast and out his back. At once he fell back dead. Then taking his sword, Egil turned against Hard, and they exchanged but few blows ere Hard fell. Just then the herd boys chanced to come up. Egil said to them, "Watch you here by Onund your master and his friends, that no beast or bird tear their bodies." Egil then went his way, and before long 11 of his comrades came to meet him, 6 staying to watch the ship. They asked him what success he had, whereupon he sang, "Long did we losers sit, losers through him who took with greed the gold that once to God I better knew, till now Borgund's bane my blade with wounds hath wrought, and hidden earth in veil of Hard and Frodi's blood." Then Egil said, "We will now turn back to the farm and act in warlike wise, slaying all the men we can and taking all the treasure we can come by." They went to the farm, rushed into the house, and killed there 15 or 16 men. Some escaped by running. They plundered the place, destroying what they could not take with them. The cattle they drove to the shore and slaughtered, putting on board as much as the boat would hold. Then they rowed out by the sound between the islands. Egil was now furious, so that there was no speaking with him. He sat at the boat's helm, and when they got further out in the firth towards Herdla, then came rowing out towards them, Rognvald the king's son with 12 more on the painted pinnace. They had now learnt that Egil's ship lay in Hurdla water, and they meant to take to Onun's news of Egil's whereabouts. And when Egil saw the boat, he knew it at once. Straight for it he steered, and when the boats came together, the beak of the cutter struck the side of the pinnace bow, which so heeled over that the water poured in on one side and the boat filled. Egil leapt aboard, grasping his halberd, and cried to his men to let no one on the pinnace escape with life. This was easy, for there was no defense. All were slain as they swam. None escaped. 13 there perished, Rognvald and his comrades. Then Egil and his men rode to Hurdla Island, and Egil sang a stave. I fought nor feared vengeance. Falcon there reddened, blood of son of Bloodaxe. Bold king and his queen perished on one pinnace. Prince with 12 his liegemen, such stress of stern battle, against them I steered. And when Egil and his men came to Hurdla, at once fully armed, they ran up to the farm buildings. But when Thorir and his household saw that, they at once ran away and saved themselves, all that could go, men and women. Egil's party plundered the place of all they could lay their hands on. Then they rowed out to their ship, nor had they long to wait before the breeze blew off the land, and they made ready to sail. And when all was ready for sailing, Egil went up into the island. He took in his hand a hazel pole, and went to a rocky eminence that looked inward toward the mainland. Then he took a horse's head and fixed it on the pole. After that, in solemn form of curse, he thus spake, Here set I up a cursed pole, and this curse I turn on King Eric and Queen Gunnhilda. This curse I turn also on the guardian spirits who dwell in this land, that they may all wander astray, nor each shall find their home till they have driven out of the land King Eric and Gunnhilda. This spoken, he planted the pole down in a rift of the rock and let it stand there. The horse's head he turned inwards to the mainland, but on the pole he cut runes, expressing the whole form of curse. After this, Egil went aboard the ship. They made sail and sailed on to sea. Soon the breeze freshened and blew strong from a good quarter, so the ship ran on apace. Then Egil sang, Forest foe fiercely blowing, flogs hard and unceasing, with sharp storm the sea way, that ship's stern doth plough, the wind willow render, with icy gust ruthless, our sea swan doth buffet o'er bowsprit and beak. Their voyage sped well. From the main they came into Borgafirth, brought their ship into the haven, carried their baggage on shore. Egil then went home to Borg, but his crew found them lodging. Skalla-Grim was now old and weak with age. Egil took the management of the property and care of the house. Chapter 61. Death of Skalla-Grim. There was a man named Thorgeir. He had to wife Thordis, Ingvar's daughter, Egil's mother's sister. Thorgeir dwelt on Swan-Ness at Lamstead. He had come out to Iceland with Ingvar. He was wealthy and much honored of men. Thorgeir and his wife had a son, Thord, who was dwelling at Lamstead after his father, when Egil now came back to Iceland. It chanced in the autumn, shortly before winter, that Thord rode into Borg to find Egil his kinsman, and he bade him to a banquet. He had ale brewed out at his home. Egil promised to go, and a day was fixed about a week thence. So when the time came, Egil prepared to go, and with him Asgerda his wife. They were a company of 10 or 12 in all. But just when Egil was ready, Skalla-Grim went out with him, and embracing him before mounted, he said, "You are late, methinks, Egil, in paying to me that money which King Athelstan sent me. What do you mean to do with that money?" Egil answered, "Are you very short of money, father? I did not know it. I shall at once let you have silver when I know you need it, but I know that you still have in your keeping 1 or 2 chests full of silver." "I suppose," said Skalla-Grim, "you think that we have made our division of the movable property. You must now be content if I do what I like with the money I have in keeping." Egil answered, "You cannot think you need to ask any leave from me in this, for you will choose to have it your own way, whatever I may say." Then Egil rode away till he came to Lamstead, where he was made heartily welcome. He was to be there 3 nights. That same evening that Egil left home, Skalla-Grim had a horse saddled. He then rode out just when others were going to bed. When he went away, he bore before him on his knees a very large chest, but under his arm he carried a brazen kettle. It has been since held for certain that he let down one or both into Crum's bog hole and dropped a large stone slab atop of them. Skalla-Grim came home about midnight, and then went to his place and lay down in his clothes. But in the morning, when it was light and people were dressed, there sat Skalla-Grim forward on the seat's edge, already dead, and so stiff that they could not straighten him nor move him, though they tried all they could. Then a man was put on horseback, who galloped off as hard as he might to Lamstead. At once he sought Egil, and told him these tidings. Then Egil took his weapons and clothes and rode home, reaching Borg by eventide. And at once, dismounting, he went in, and to the passage that was round the hall, with doors leading from the passage to the seats inside. Egil went on to the chief seat, and took Skalla-Grim by the shoulders and forced him backwards, laid him down in the seat, and rendered then services to the dead. Then Egil bade them take in digging tools and break open the wall on the south side. When this was done, then Egil supported the head, and others the feet of Skalla-Grim. So they bore him athwart the house out through the breach in the wall. Then they bore him immediately down to Naustaness. There for the night a tent was set over the body. But in the morning with flood tide, Skalla-Grim was put on a boat and rowed out to Digraness. There Egil had a mound raised on the point of the ness. Therein was laid Skalla-Grim, with his horse, his weapons, and his smithy tools. It is not told that any valuables were laid in the mound beside him. Egil took the heritage, lands, and chattels. Thenceforth he ruled the house. With Egil there was Thordis, daughter of Thorolf, and Elsgada. Chapter 62. Egil's Voyage to England. King Eric ruled over Norway 1 year after the death of his father, King Harald, before Hakon Athelstan's foster son, another son of Harald, came out of the west from England. And in that same summer, Egil Skallagrimsson went to Iceland. Hakon went northwards to Trondheim. He was there accepted as king. He and Eric were for the winter both king in Norway. But in the following spring each gathered an army. Hakon had by far the larger numbers. The reason of this was that he made it law in the land that every man should own his patrimony, where King Harald had enslaved all rich and poor alike. Eric saw no other choice but to flee the land, so he went abroad with Gunnhilda his wife and their children. Lord Arinbjorn was King Eric's foster brother and foster father of his son. Dear to the king was he above all his barons. The king had set him as ruler over all the Firth folk. Arinbjorn was with the king when he left the land. They first went westwards over the main to the Orkneys. There Eric gave his daughter Rognvald in marriage to Earl Arnfinn. After that he went south with his force along the coast of Scotland and harried there, then still south to England and harried there. And when King Athelstan heard of this, he gathered force and went against Eric. But when they met, terms were proposed, and the terms were that King Athelstan gave to Eric the government of Northumberland, and he was to be for King Athelstan defender of the land against the Scots and the Irish. Athelstan had made Scotland tributary under him after the death of King Olaf, but that people were constantly disloyal to him. The story goes that Gunnhilda had a spell worked, this spell being that Egil Skallagrimsson should find no rest in Iceland till she had seen him. But in that summer when Hakon and Eric had met and contended for Norway, all travel to any land from Norway was forbidden. So in that summer there came to Iceland from Norway neither ship nor tidings. Egil Skallagrimsson abode at his home. But during the second winter that he was living at Borg, after Skallagrim's death, Egil became melancholy, and this was more marked as the winter wore on. And when summer came, Egil let it be known that he meant to make ready his ship for a voyage out in the summer. He then got a crew. He purposed to set sail to England. There were 30 men on the ship. Asgerda remained behind and took charge of the house. Egil's purpose was to seek King Athelstan and look after the promise that he had made to Egil at the last parting. It was late ere Egil was ready, and when he put to sea the winds delayed him. Autumn then came on and rough weather set in. They sailed past the north coast of the Orkneys. Egil would not put in there, for he thought King Eric's power would be supreme all over the islands. Then they sailed southwards past Scotland and had great storms and cross winds. Weathering the Scotch coast, they held on southwards along England. But on the evening of a day, as darkness came on, it blew a gale. Before they were aware, breakers were both seaward and ahead. There was nothing for it but to make land, and this they did. Under sail they ran ashore and came to land at Humbermouth. All the men were saved and most of the cargo, but as for the ship, it was broken into pieces. When they found men to speak with, they learnt these tidings, which Egil thought good. There was that King Athelstan all was well, and with his kingdom, but other tidings were with which Egil thought dangerous, that King Eric Bloodaxe was there, and Gunnhilda, and they had the government of the province, and Eric was but a short way up the country in the town of York. This also Egil learnt, that Lord Arinbjorn, and there with the king, and in great friendship with him. And when Egil got to know these tidings, he resolved what to do. He thought he had little hope of escape, though he should try to conceal himself, and to go disguised as long as he might, till he were clear of Eric's dominions. For he was at the time easily known by such as would see him. He thought also it were a man's fate to be captured in such flight. So he took a bold heart, and resolved that at once, in that very night, when they came there, he would get him a horse and ride to town. He came there in the evening, and rode at once into the town. He had now a hood drawn over him, and was fully armed. Egil inquired where in the town Arinbjorn was housed. It was told to him. He rode to the house, and when he came to the hall door, he dismounted from his horse and found a man to speak to. It was told him that Arinbjorn sat at meat. Egil said, "I would fain, good fellow, you should go into the hall and ask Arinbjorn whether he will rather speak with, out or within, to Egil Skallagrimsson." The man said, "'Tis but little trouble for me to do this errand." He went into the hall and spoke quite loud. "There is a man come here, out before the door," said he, "big as a giant, and he begged me go in and ask whether you would rather within or without speak to Egil Skallagrimsson." Arinbjorn said, go and beg him to bide without, nor shall he need to bide long." He did as Arinbjorn told him, went out and said what had been said. Arinbjorn bade take up the tables, then went he out, and all his housecarls with him. And when Arinbjorn met Egil, he greeted him well, and asked why he had come there. Egil in a few words told him clearly of his journey, and now you shall see what counsel I ought to take, if you will give me any help. "Have you," said Arinbjorn, "before you came to this house met any men in town who are likely to have known who you are?" "None," said Egil. "Let me then take their weapons," said Arinbjorn. They did so, but when all were armed, then went the king to the house, and when they came to the hall, then Arinbjorn knocked on the door, asking them to open, and saying who was there. The doorkeepers at once opened the door. The king was sitting at table. Arinbjorn then bade that they should go in 12 in number, naming for this Egil and 10 others. "Now shall you, Egil, bring the king your head and clasp his foot, but I will be your spokesman." They then went in. Arinbjorn went before the king and saluted him. The king received him and asked what he would have. Arinbjorn said, "I lead hither one who has come a long way to seek thee in thy place, and to be reconciled to thee. Great is this honor to you, my lord. When thine enemies travel of their own free will from other lands, and deem they cannot endure thy wrath, though they be nowhere near you. Now show thyself princely to this man. Let him get of these good terms, seeing that he hath so magnified thine honor, as thou now mayst see, by braving many seas and dangers to come hither from his own home. No compulsion drove him to this journey, naught but goodwill to thee." Then the king looked round and saw over men's heads where Egil stood. The king knew him at once, darting a keen glance at him, and said, "How wert thou so bold, Egil, that thou darest to come before me? Thy last parting from me was such that of life thou couldst have from me no hope." Then went Egil up to the table and clasped the foot of the king. He then sang, "With cross winds far cruising, I came on my wave horse. Eric, England's warder, eager soon to see, now wielder of wound flash, white dauntless and daring, that strong strand of Harald's stout lineage I meet." King Eric said, "I need not to count the crimes on thy hands, for there are so many and great, that each one might well warrant that thou not give hence alive. Thou hast nothing else to expect, but are thou that you must die. This you mightest know before, thou would get no terms from me." Gunnhilda said, "Why shall not Egil be slain at once? Remember thou no more, O king, what Egil had done to thee, slain thy friends and kin, and even thy own son to boot, and cursed you. Wherever was it known that a king was thus dealt with?" Arinbjorn said, "If Egil have spoken evil of the king, for that he can now atone in words praise that shall live for all time." Gunnhilda said, "We will hear none of this praise, O king. Bid Egil be led out and beheaded. I will neither hear his words nor look at him." Then said Arinbjorn, "The king will not let himself be egged on to all thy dastardly work. He will not have Egil slain by night, for night slaying is murder." The king said, "So shall it be, Arinbjorn, as thou demandest. Egil shall live this night. Take thou him home with thee, and bring him to me in the morning." Arinbjorn thanked the king for his words. "We hope, my lord, that henceforth Egil's cause will take a better turn, and though Egil has done great wrong against you, you look on this, that he has suffered much from thee and thy kin. King Harald thy father took the life of Thorolf, a man of renown, Egil's father's brother, for the slander of bad men, for no crime at all. And though, O king, did break the law in Egil's case for the sake of Borgund, nay further did thou wish doom to his death, and did thou slay men, and plunder all his goods, and withal did make him an outlaw and drive him from this land. and Egil is one who will stand no teasing. But in every cause under judgment one must look on the act with its reasons. I will now have Egil in keeping for the night." Then Arinbjorn and Egil went back to the house, and when they came in they too went into a small upper room and talked over the matter. Arinbjorn said the king just now was very wroth, yet methought his mood rather softened before the end, and fortune will now decide what there may be the upshot. I know that Gunnhilda will set all her mind on marring your cause. Now I would fain that we take this counsel, that you be awake through the night, and compose a song of praise about King Eric. I should think it had best be a poem of 20 stanzas, and you might recite it tomorrow when we come before the king. Thus did Bragi, my kinsman, when he was under the wrath of Bjorn, king of Sweden. He composed a poem of praise about him in one night, and for it received his head. Now may we also have the same luck with the king, that you may make your peace with him, if you can offer up the poem of praise." Egil said, "I shall try this counsel that you wish, but 'twas the last thing I ever meant to sing King Eric's praises." Arinbjorn bade him try. Then Arinbjorn went away and had food and drink carried up to the room. Egil was there for all the night. Arinbjorn went to his men, and they sate over the drink till midnight. Then Arinbjorn and his men went to the sleeping chambers, but before undressing he went up to the room to Egil and asked him how he was getting on with the poem. Egil said that nothing was done. "Here," said he, "sat a swallow by the window and twittered all night, so that I have never got rest for the same." Whereupon Arinbjorn went away and out by the door leading up to the house roof, and he sat by the window of the upper room where the bird had been before. He saw that something of a shape which possessed moved away from the room. Arinbjorn sat there by the window all night till dawn, but after Arinbjorn had come the Egil composed all the poem, and got it so by heart that he could recite it in the morning when he met Arinbjorn. They watched for a fit time to go before the king. Chapter 63. Egil recites the poem. King Eric went to the table according to his wont, and much people were with him. And when Arinbjorn knew this, then went he with all his followers fully armed to the king's palace, while the king sat at the table. Arinbjorn craved entrance into the hall. It was granted. He and Egil went in with half of his followers, but the other half stood without before the door. Arinbjorn saluted the king. The king received him well. Arinbjorn spoke. "Here now is come Egil. He has not sought to run away in the night, nor would we fain know, my lord, what his lost it would be. I hope thou wilt let him in, get good words from mine, for I think it a matter of great moment to me that Egil gain terms from thee. I have so acted that neither in word nor deed have I spared aught whereby thy honour should be made greater than before. I have also abandoned all my possessions, kinsmen, and friends that I had in Norway, and followed thee when all other barons deserted thee, and here endure what I is meet, for thou hast often done great good to me." Then spoke Gunnhilda, "Cease, Arinbjorn, nor prate so at length of this. Thou hast done much good to King Eric, and this he hath fully rewarded. Thou owest far more duty to King Eric than to Egil. It is not for thee to ask that Egil go unpunished, hence from King Eric's presence, seeing what crimes he hath wrought." Then said Arinbjorn, "If thou, O king, and thou Gunnhilda, if ye two have resolved that Egil shall here get no terms, then is this that manly course to give him respite and leave to go for a week, that he may look out for himself of his own free will any way he come to hither seek you, and therefore hoped for peace. Thereafter this done, let your dealings altogether end as they may." Gunnhilda said, Well can I see by this, Arinbjorn, that thou art more faithful to Egil than to King Eric. If Egil is to ride hence for a week, then will he be in the same time come to King Athelstan? But King Eric cannot now hide this from himself, that every king is now stronger than he is, whereas a little while ago it had been deemed incredible that King Eric would not have the will and energy to avenge his wrongs on one such as Egil. Said Arinbjorn, no one will call Eric a greater man for slaying a yeoman's son, a foreigner who has freely come into his power. But if the king wishes to achieve greatness hereby, then will I help him in this, so that these tidings shall be thought more worthy of record. For I and Egil will now back each other, so that we must both be met at once. Thou wilt then, O king, dearly buy the life of Egil, when we all be laid dead on the field, I and my followers. Far other treatment should I have expected of thee than thou would prefer seeing me laid dead on the earth to granting me the boon I crave of one man's life. Then answered the king, a wondrous eager champion art thou, Arinbjorn, in this thy helping of Egil. Loth were I to do thee scathe if it come to this, if thou would rather give my way thy own life, than that to be slain. But sufficient are the charges against Egil, whatever I cause to be done with him. And when the king had said this, then Egil advanced before him, and began the poem, and recited in a loud voice, and at once won silence. Westward I sailed the wave, within me Odin gave. The sea of song I bear, so 'tis my wont to fare. I launched my floating oak, when loosening ice floes broke. My mind a galleon fought, with a load of minstrel thought. A prince doth hold me guest, praise be his due confessed. Of Odin's mead let draught, in England now bequeathed. Loud bear I to the king, loudly his honour sing. Silence I crave around, my song of praise is found. Sire, mark the tale I tell, such heed beseems thee well. Better I chant my strain, if stillness hushed I gain. The monarch's wars in words, widely have peoples heard, but Odin saw alone, bodies before him strown. Swelled of swords the sound, smiting bucklers round, fiercely waxed the fray, forward the king made way. Struck the ear while blood streamed from glaives in flood, iron hailstorm's song, heavy, loud and long. Lances a woven fence, well-ordered bristle dense, on royal ships in line, exulting spearmen shine. Soon dark with bloody stain, seethed there an angry main, with war fleets thundering sound, with wounds and din around. Of men many a rank, mid showering darts sank. Glory and fame got Eric's name. More may yet be told, and men silence hold. Further feats and glory, fame hath noised in story. Warriors' wounds were rife, where the chief waged strife. Shivered swords with stroke on blue shield rims broke. Breastplates ringing crashed, burning helm fire flashed. Biting point of glaive, bloody wound did grave. Odin's oaks, they say, in that iron play. Baldric's crystal blade, bowed and prostrate laid. Spears crossing dashed, sword edges clashed. Glory and fame got Eric's name. Red blade the king did wield, ravens flock over the field. Dripping spears flew madly, darts with aim full deadly. Scotland's scourge let feed, Wolf the ogress steed. For urn of downtrod dead, dainty meal was spread. Sword battle cranes o'er corse-strewn lanes, found flesh fowl's bill of blood its fill, while deep the wound he delves around, grim raven's beak blood fountains break. Axe-furnished feast for ogress beast, Eric on the wave to wolf's flesh banquet gave. Javelins flying sped, peace affrighted fled, bows were bent amain, wolves were battle fain, spears in shivers split, sword teeth keenly bit, archers' strings loud sang, arrows forward sprang. He back his buckler flings from arms beset with rings, sword play stirrer good, spiller of foeman's blood, waxing everywhere, witness true I bear, east o'er billows came Eric's sounding name. Bent the king his yew, bees wound bearing flew, Eric on the wave to wolf flesh banquet gave. Yet to make more plain, I to men were fain, high-souled mood of king, but must swiftly sing. Weapons when he takes, the battle goddess wakes, on ship's shielded side streams the battle tide. Gems from wrist he gives, glittering armlets rivs, lavish ring despiser, loves not hoarding miser. Frodi's flower of gold gladdens rovers bold, prince bestoweth scorning, pebbles hand adoring. Foemen might stand for his dreadful brand, yew-bow loudly sang, swore blades meeting rang, lances high were cast, still he the land held fast. Proud Eric, prince renowned, and praise his feats hath crowned. Monarch at thy will, judge my minstrel skill, silence thus to find, sweetly cheered my mind, moved my mouth with word, from my heart's ground stirred, draught of Odin's wave, due to warrior brave. Silence I have broken, a sovereign's glory spoken, words I knew well fitting, warrior council sitting. Praise from heart I bring, praise to honored king, plain I sang and clear, song that all could hear.